Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Wyndham Championship. Gonna break down what to expect from this event, as well as how I'm attacking my modeling and DFS and betting exposure for this event. It's the last week of the regular season schedule, so obviously a lot on the line when it comes to keeping your status and getting into this FedEx Cup playoffs. And of course, some GPPs to take down, some outright bets that have got our names on it. So a lot to get into for this week. So I'm stoked for it, excited to get after it here. And it started off with a look at my modeling and key stats that I'm using to identify some of those top plays. Sedgefield Country Club is more of a positional golf course and very similar to some of the other layup golf courses that we have on the PGA Tour. It's only about 7,100 yards, and though it typically plays pretty easy, this year we've got a tropical storm heading through the area. So if you haven't seen the news, there is going to be a storm heading right through North Carolina Thursday and Friday, which means we may have over 3 inches of rain come through the area, at least if the local forecasts are correct. So if that happens, it could very easily be a delay in play. Heck, could even be a 54-hole golf tournament, or in a worst case scenario, might be a complete washout. So I think the weather going to be a huge impact for this week, but unfortunately here on a Monday, we don't have the tee times to look at and or a clear weather forecast. So the one thing I'll say is that it does look like it could be a very wet week. If they end up playing through some of the storms, could be brutally difficult out there on Thursday and Friday, but far too much unknown right now to really talk about anything from that side. One thing I will note is that it might play a little bit softer this year, but if it's going to be extremely windy and they play through it, you could have some of the harder scoring conditions that we've seen at this golf course. But putting that aside, just diving into what we usually see at Sedgefield, and from the approach profile, it's a lot of those mid to long irons. You'd expect for only a 7,100 yard golf course to have quite a few wedges, but because the golf course forces you to lay up far more often than not, you're going to have a lot of shots from 125 yards out to about 225. So that's where a majority of my weighting is going to be this weekend. Because it is a second shot golf course, that's what you get when you have a lot of layups. The approach play is going to be by far our number one key stat. At number 2, we've got shots gained putting. I'm looking at some recent form metrics when it comes to the flat stick, but also some Bermuda grass numbers. You've got a pure Bermuda grass out there from tip to toe. So whether it's the greens, rough, collars, fairways, tees, everything is going to be some variation of Bermuda. Off the tee, as I mentioned, much more of a positional golf course. So though driving distance isn't something that you can completely ignore, it's going to be a little bit helpful on the par 5s. Also for just hitting shorter clubs into the greens, it is much more about driving accuracy and good drive percentage than it is going out there and overpowering the place. Number 4, I've got approach out of Bermuda rough. So because you've got real narrow fairways out there, and perhaps with the added wind, I think you might see a few more missed fairways. So something that I'm mixing in and that my friends over there at Bet the Number we're looking at as well. Around the green, we've got recent form, but also once again that Bermuda grass baseline, as everything here is going to be that Bermuda. And then for our comp courses, we've got 6 to choose from, but these top 3 are by far my favorite. So we'll focus on those 3. You got TPC Southwind, short Bermuda grass par 70 that fits pretty much everything that we have this week. TPC River Highlands, another short par 70, albeit with a different set of agronomy. And then Colonial Country Club, similar kind of story, right? Different agronomy, but a lot of the same kind of shots and a lot of forced layups off the tee. So I think that all 3 are exceptional comp courses, but you could even throw in a TPC Sawgrass that does have that Bermuda grass in play. TPC San Antonio, another short track where it's hard to hit fairways. John Deere, it's a little bit easier than what we're getting this week, but another one of those shorter, more positional kind of golf courses. And then also TPC Twin Cities, which we saw for the 3M Open, are all, I think, worthy of some comparison. So with that being said, we've talked about our modeling, what I'm looking for in players. Now let's apply that and try and find some of our top targets. So we're going to have 6 plays here, 3 core plays, 3 value plays that I point out, but also an extra 4 outright bets that I've taken. So a little bit more outright / betting exposure this week, and 6 core plays as I mentioned before. Let's start it off with Sungjae at the top end of the board. He's the most expensive player. He's also the shortest outright number that I'm taking, and he's 16 to 1. I think in DFS, he will be one of the more popular plays, and I think it's well warranted here. The event history is unmatched. You got T14, T2, T24, also 2 top 10 finishes back there in 2020 and 2019. The shots gained heading in are solid as well. If you take a look at that, you can see he has the T7 at the Open, of course. pretty solid finish, top 5 there at the Genesis, a T12 at the John Deere. And if you look at the shots gained metrics, it all lines up as well. He's gaining across all 4 stat categories, most impressively out there with the iron play, and even out to the last 24 rounds, he is still gaining across the board. So a very sustainable kind of shots gained profile, and what we're used to seeing from Sungjae. Towards the middle to end of last season, he kind of fell off in a few key categories, and now that we're starting to get that vintage Sungjae, part of it may have been injury, right? We had that with Sungjae. He was dealing with a little bit of a recurring wrist injury out there. Seems to be doing a lot better, a lot healthier, and you're seeing that with the results. Now that we're getting him at more of a positional track, that's what he is off the tee, a very straight driver of the golf ball. Iron play has been dialed in over the last few months. You get him on Bermuda grass, which is also a very good surface for him in terms of his long-term baseline, and the greens that he's lit up over the last few years. I mean, it's just a spot where I think you might have that form peaking at the right time, course fit peaking at the right time, hell, even health out there for Sun GM being a huge plus. Which is why I'll take him for the outright at 16-1. So I think a DFS will be popular, but I think that is well warranted, and more importantly, has the kind of upside to go out there and crack out there for a win. So, it's been quite some time for Sungjae since we've had that kind of pop performance, but historically, he is the kind of guy that you trust out there on a Sunday, and not somebody that is a serial choker or anything like that. So definitely a little bit of a short outright odds there at 16-1, but I think was well warranted with all those factors in play. Next up, we got Brian Harman down here at 30-1. He is $9,300. I think a very affordable price tag. And you also like him at these short positional tracks. You like him at courses where it's about that driving accuracy over the driving distance. And an added thing that I think separates him from some of the other outrights that we'll talk about is ability to go out there and grind in nasty conditions. And I already said that it's hard to go out there and kind of figure out whether we're going to play on Thursday and Friday. But if they play in windy and rainy conditions, there is no one in the field that I trust more to go out there and grind than a Brian Harman. You've seen it in the Open Championships. You've seen it time and time again from him when conditions get nasty, him having some of the better rounds out there in the event. So, I like that aspect to it. Even if he gets the bad end of the draw this week, right, maybe he can go out there and still pull through for us. And at 30-1, it was also a better outright number than a lot of the other sports books out there. So another guy mixed in, I think will be maybe averagely owned down here in this range. Sungjae will probably be chalky. I would imagine that some people are going to play Billy Horschel this week with his course history. He's not going to be overlooked. You'll still have guys that'll play Davis Thompson. Akshay Bhatia, I imagine, would be a pretty popular play. But he's also not going to be like 25% owned, like we have up there with the Sungjae. I mean, Sungjae, it's only Monday. It's hard to really say where he's going to come in with the ownership. I could see him even being like 30% owned out there on Wednesday. That shouldn't be the case here with Brian Harman. I'm assuming that he's going to come in closer to about 15% ownership, which will give you a much easier time going out there and getting leverage in your lineups, and also can give you a bit more differentiation as well. Next up, our next outright will be Christiaan Bezuidenhout at $8,700. Another core play that I'm pointing out here, and a player that fits this style of golf course. Now, the form maybe not as solid as what you had with Sungjae, but still quietly chugging along with his shots gained metrics. You can see positive in all 4 stat categories. That would be over his last 12 measured rounds, and even over his last 24 rounds, where it's only 3 of the 4 categories that he's positive. He is a very accurate driver of the golf ball, so definitely not the longest cat. He's done a little bit better off the tee over the last year or so, but at this style of golf course where it's about putting yourself in position, leaning on that fairway from in game, reminds me a lot of Webb Simpson, who of course is the whisperer around Sedgefield. He's got a win here, named one of his children after the damn golf course. A player that pretty much every time he tees it up goes out there in top 10s. Now, Bezuidenhout doesn't quite have that kind of course history yet, but he's that same style of player. So you can see in his 3 starts here, he has made the cut in every single trip, but now that he's turning into a much more well-rounded player, a much more consistent player out here, and now starting to gain across all 4 stat categories, is the kind of player that I think could win at this event. Now, that's why I took him at 40-1, but in DFS, the reason why I'll point him out as a core play is that he doesn't have to win to pay off an $8,700 price tag. A top 10 would be enough, and I think that in this kind of field, especially now that he's taken his game to another level, that he has the upside to go out there and get that kind of thing done. So you can see here, number 18 in the rankings when it comes to recent form. Some of the longer term stuff is actually even more favorable out there for Seabez. You can see he's the number 14 ranked play in the entire field. A solid Bermuda grass putter. Meant to mention that about guys like Brian Harmon and Sun Ji-im. All of these guys gain strokes to their baseline on Bermuda grass. So if you didn't see my course breakdown, I talk extensively about why Bermuda grass in particular is a course where you see a lot of the course kind of cats go out there and have a lot of success. It's because Bermuda grass is very unique. You have that grain in play, whether it's chipping off of it or going out there and putting Bermuda grass greens. There is an art form for knowing how to do so. Playing guys that have had solid stats on it or that are very familiar with that type of agronomy can reap benefits at these sort of events. And the one thing you get with the Wyndham that isn't always the case, like when we have Bermuda grass greens, is that you get Bermuda from tip to toe. So the guys that are excellent or exceptional on the surface are not only going to get a benefit on the greens, but also around the greens. So as you saw with our key stats earlier, right, I'm looking at around the green stats on Bermuda grass, heck, even approach out of that Bermuda rough, and pretty much no matter which metric you look at out there for Bezainhout, he is a huge positive in every single category. So that's why the course metrics are a little bit higher on him than you'd expect, even with him losing shots off the tee over his last 24, right? The last 24 rounds aren't as solid as what we've seen over the last 12, but because of the fact that all of the approach stats around the green stuff on Bermuda grass pop, that is why I'm still willing to take him at 40-1. Before we talk about our last three value plays and a few other outright bets that I'm mixing in for the week, I'm going to go ahead and point out my Patreon page, which of course can be accessed down there in the description of this video. If you join the golf/DFS tier, you can get access to everything you see on the spreadsheet. That'll include all my ownership projections when they're done Tuesday afternoon. Also my entire player pool, shots gained metrics, modeling for every player. You've got the recent form on here, as you can see over the last few events. You've got event history for every player in the field. The shots gained metrics, my model weights that of course were censored over here on the right, all of course for your access in your process. So it'll give you perspective for what I'm getting to in any given week, but also give you all the research tools that you need to go out there and do your process yourself. So it's only $15 for a month on there. It is a very reasonable price tag, especially compared to some of the other sites out there, which are costing you $50 to sometimes well over $100 a month for their services. Over here, it's just $15. Again, very reasonable. And on top of that, you also get showdown content for rounds 2 through 4. So you'll have main slate every week, showdown for rounds 2 through 4. All of this data, the ownership projections, of course, change out there for showdown as well. Projected points, player pool, all of that. So make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already. And again, a great value over there, a way to get all the content that I have to offer and my take on every single player that's playing, not just the few guys that we talk about here in these previews. But next up, we've got ourselves JT Poston. So our first value play for me is anybody that is $8,000 and cheaper on most weeks. Sometimes if it goes up to like a $13K price tag, I'll push that up just a little bit. But JT Poston at $7,900, another guy that I took for an outright at 60-1. So a player that's won here before, back there in I believe 2019, was able to get the job done. So you can see back there, Poston went cut, but did have that T7 last year and a T21 the year before that, and a very accurate driver of the golf ball that once again is a solid putter out there on Bermuda grass. And then if you take a look at his approach profile, is best from the mid to longer irons. He's not always the best wedge player, but when you give him like a 9 iron to something out there to a 6, is one of the best players out there on the PGA Tour. So this golf course, I don't think it's a coincidence that he's gone out there and had so much success here. And though the shots gained metrics aren't perfect, right? That's why we're getting him at a slightly cheaper price tag. Also why I think we're going to get a discounted ownership mark out here on JT Poston. He's been doing his thing with the short game at least, right? Gaining around the green, doing his thing with the putter. You zoom out a little bit, it's a lot of similar stuff, right? Losing in the 2 ball striking categories, but going out there and doing solid things with the short game stuff. I'll take him for a get right spot, right? He's not going to come in with the best form, but that's also why we're getting a much better outright number on him. If he was coming in with form, he'd probably be closer to like 25 or 30-1. He would probably also be like 88 to maybe even $9,500. So you're getting, buying the dip out there per se, out there on somebody like JT Poston. And historically with the course history, the course fit makes a whole lot of sense at this kind of golf course. A few outrights I'm going to point out. We're not going to really do a whole deep dive here or anything, but I did bet Will Zalatoris and Nick Dunlap at some 75 to 1. Will Zalatoris, if I'd want to do anything with him this week, right, maybe you throw him in a few lineups for DFS, but I think the best format might be an outright bet, right? If he ends up withdrawing before lock, you're not going to get killed there. You'll get refunded on most sports books. And if he's back, right, he took quite a lengthy break after going out there and having to withdraw. If he's back to his former self, this is a criminal number, right? 75 to 1 would make no sense if we're getting a vintage Will Zalatoris. Now that's a huge if, but that's also why you're betting the guy at 75 to 1. So it's a pure upside play there. I think at DFS maybe a little bit more risky, but we'll have to see what he says in some of his pressers this week and how he's feeling out there for this golf tournament. But next up, Nick Dunlap, I also took it 75 to 1. I think he's much more in play for DFS. We're just not going to talk about everyone here that I want to, but I really like the play. The Bermuda grass stats are excellent, really good putter on Bermuda, but one of the best players in the field when it comes to approach play out of Bermuda rough, and also one of the best around the green players when it comes to Bermuda grass. So a course horse, right? Somebody that really fits this kind of track. And though he's a little bit inaccurate off the tee, the numbers out of the rough kind of make up for that, and hopefully him laying up off the tee can lead to him hitting a few more fairways. And just to give you an idea, guys like Cam Davis are that same sort of player, right? Like Cam Davis does not hit a lot of fairways, and I don't even know. Yeah, there he is, right? $8,900. If you look at Cam Davis's course history, you'd probably be surprised. It's because he's laying up off the tee, right? He top 10 last year, T15, T22 back there 5 years ago. I think the reason why he can still get it done here is his iron play, his putting is solid enough to still get the job done. So I don't think you can completely ignore guys just because they're not the most accurate player. And I think Nick Dunlap is a perfect example of that. By the way, if you take a look at Cam Davis's shots gained profile, he's really good at Bermuda rough. So I think that's maybe why he's able to take advantage of that. Next up, we got Ben Griffin as our next value play, official play out here. He's also a guy I took for an outright bet at 75 to 1. And it's worth noting, if you take a look at his Sedgefield fit over here, from the course fit perspective, he's the number 2 player in the field. So the fact that he's number 39 in the pricing down here at number 2 course fit just made him an absolute steal. So he opened up at 60 to 1 on Hard Rock Bet. He actually got bumped from 60 up to 75 to 1. And after seeing that, with somebody I went out there and fired for an outright bet. He's been playing a lot better golf lately than what we're used to seeing. And the fact that he's only $7,300 is a little bit of a head scratcher to me. I think that he should probably be around $8,000 if I was making the pricing. And if you take a look at the shots gained profile, he's been doing vintage Ben Griffin stuff. I mean, just going out there, striping his irons. Off the tee is always a little bit of a loose cannon, but if you take a look at his event history here, right, he's had a lot of success around this kind of track. So we go down here to 7,300, you'll see that he missed the cut last year, but the year before that did have a top 5 finish and one of his first starts back out there on the PGA Tour. So this is a track that seemingly brings out the best in Ben Griffin's game. And if you take a look at a lot of those comp courses that we mentioned before, he's had a ton of success, and especially recent success at a lot of these kind of golf courses. So, if we take a look at the recent form from Ben Griffin, you'll see exactly what we're talking about here, right? So T39, I believe that was at the Genesis, but if we go before that, T5, T31 at 2 golf courses that play pretty similar, right? John Deere was on the list. I think Rocket Mortgage, decent enough comp there as well. So he's played well at the comps. He's played well at this golf course, number 2 course fit, Bermuda grass specialist. Go ahead and sign me up for some Ben Griffin. Before we talk about our last full play, I do want to point out the last 2 outrights that we're not going to cover in full detail, but I did want to point out to you guys from the betting card perspective. I did bet Ben Coles for a top 5 at 22 to 1. He was at 20 to 1, did get a 10% profit boost over there on Hard Rock. So I got that up to 22 to 1 myself, but you can see he's gaining on Bermuda grass, also a very accurate driver of the golf ball. So somebody I took for a little bit of a top end performance there, a little spike performance out there for Ben Coles, hopefully. And then the last outright, which is a pure upside play. This is probably lighting money on fire, but I did take Daniel Berger at 150 to 1. Most other books have him at a lower number than that, so a little bit of line value, I guess, if you're going ahead and comparing other books. But the shots gained metrics, particularly tee to green, have been there for Daniel Berger. And you can see historically a pretty decent putter out there on Bermuda. In fact, gains about 0.2 strokes per round on the surface, and that is 0.9 strokes better than his baseline lately. So as I said, right, tee to green has been there. Putter has completely failed Daniel Berger so far. So maybe getting him back on Bermuda, a surface that has been his best out there on the PGA Tour, can get him back into the positive for once. And like I said, probably a crapshoot for him to go out there and win at 150 to 1. But I did bet it, so I'm going to point it out to you guys. Right, might not hit, but I at least wanted to give you guys all my exposure to be transparent about it. And then the last core play, though, the last official play out here for the video, is going to be Brendan Todd at 100 to 1. So he's 70 to 1, and this is a quintessential Brendan Todd golf course, right? A track where it's not all about the driving distance off the tee. If you can be a good putter, a good player with those mid to long irons, you can go out there and find a lot of success. So it's not a surprise that if you take a look at his course history, that outside of the missed cut 4 years ago, that it's been excellent stuff. Top 10 last year, made the cut T36 the year before that, and then a T10 back there, I believe in 2021, are all optimal performances, right? These, especially the T7, the T10 performances, are all going to get you to the optimal lineup at this kind of price tag. And I took him for the outright at 100 to 1 too. I mean, this is the kind of guy that pops out of nowhere. A lot of times when he's playing his best golf at this kind of track, it's him going out there top 5 or even winning the golf tournament. So it was a decent number compared to other books. 100 to 1 was very comparable to some of the better numbers out there. And you can see recent form ranking isn't popping that much, right? He's number 41 in the field. Heck, even total model ranking, number 52. That's very fair for this kind of price tag, but it's been on harder golf courses. It's been on tracks that don't necessarily fit his game. And when you take a look at his best performances, best results here in 2024, it's been at the shorter tracks that we've had. So you can see he's gaining a bunch of strokes on Bermuda, one of the most accurate players off the tee that we have on the PGA Tour. So if you're looking for a course source, he fits that in buckets and spades, and is why I'm getting to him for some exposure this week. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Before you hop out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. As long as they're at least 30 to 1 to win the golf tournament, you'll win out a free month of my Patreon if they take home the trophy. So go ahead, claim your player down below, because as soon as somebody is taken once, they cannot be taken again. So make sure they're at least 30 to 1. Like I said, give me your best guess down below, and may the best person go out there and win. I appreciate you, appreciate the support here on the channel. Make sure you subscribe if you guys haven't already, so you don't miss any of the content throughout the week. That will include some prop content over there on the Patreon, maybe even a prop preview if we end up getting the boards posted early, and also our weekly live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where you guys can check out all the last second info before lock. So that'll include ownership projections on there. We'll have that to compare to, talk about some of the game theory heading into lock. Also go through the weather forecast, what to expect from that tropical storm there on Thursday and Friday, how that's going to impact play. That's probably going to be a very important segment out there for this kind of event. And then afterwards, we'll talk through all of your questions and some of the game theory and lineup construction notes out there for this slate. So a lot to come. Make sure you guys stop by at that live stream, the best hour of the week. It's a lot of fun interacting with you guys down there, and making sure we're ready to go and crush our exposure. I appreciate you. Like I said before, smash that like button if you haven't already, and let's have ourselves a week for this Wyndham Championship.